It was 3:15 p.m. in Los Angeles. The sky was perfect blue, and the scent from the Pacific faintly carried itself through the warm air. I left work early that day and headed straight home. I entered my complex, said hello to the doorman, retrieved my mail from the front counter, then entered the elevator and pressed P for penthouse. I was moving slowly down the narrow hallway when I saw a package sitting outside my door. I stopped in front of it and studied its odd, almost oval shape. It had nothing on it. No address, no stamps, not even my name. Just a misshapen cardboard package. I picked it up and noticed it was extremely light. The cardboard itself weighed more than the contents. I turned it over, and on its bottom it read, "Letters from the tortured place," in calligraphy. I distinctly remember that for some reason. As I stood outside my door, holding in one hand the oblong-shaped parcel and staring listlessly out the gigantic stained glass windows overlooking the city, I felt a sense of dread. And when I unlocked the door and stepped into my condo and placed the box, if you could even call it that, on the couch, trying to ignore it, the air inside felt thicker, almost humid. I walked over to the bar and made myself a drink, then hovered over the thing that lay on the couch. I squinted and stared at it, tilting my head, trying to look through it. Simon, my 8-year-old Scottish Terrier at the time, came over to investigate. He sniffed it and let out a whimper. His eyes went back, and he looked terrified all of a sudden. "It's all right, bud. Probably not even the right address," I told him. But I was really telling myself that. It was October when I received the package, and figured it was probably a Halloween prank. That was a comforting thought for a moment, until I remembered you needed permission from management to enter the complex, and the entire perimeter was gated, with cameras everywhere. And all of my mail, including boxes, were always left at the front desk. I grabbed a knife and grabbed the package, sitting down on my couch, and then again staring out the window. The city warmed me, and I thought maybe I was overreacting. Someone obviously just slipped into the elevator unseen and decided to mess with me. Probably a friend of mine, I figured. Probably someone who lived in the same building. I cut the package open and pulled out 3 pieces of paper, stapled together. The prank started to lose its charm when I read the first piece of paper. John Houston cheated on his wife and beat his children. Now John Houston eats worms and maggots for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I knew John Houston. He worked in Silicon Valley before moving to Los Angeles after his wife divorced him. He died in a car accident a couple miles from LAX, on his way to catch a flight to Las Vegas. The letter continued. John Houston's eyes were 20/20. Now John Houston has no eyes, or ears, or tongue. I was numb. I had no idea who would write something like this. As far as I knew, John Houston had no real enemies, and hundreds of people showed up to his funeral. He weeps and cries through his missing eyes, and his ears are nowhere to be found, the letter concluded. I looked at the other 2 pieces of paper, stapled to the John Houston letter. "Keep me," they both said. I just set the paper down. I didn't put them anywhere specific at first. I just placed them neatly on the couch and stood up, once again overlooking the city. But this time the city didn't warm me. It couldn't. Even if it was a prank, the letter was disturbing, and the keep me papers were unsettling. I called my friend James, an acquaintance and former coworker of John Houston's. He answered, and we made small talk back and forth for a minute. But he could tell something was up. Are you all right? He asked me. Yeah. I fumbled around, looking for the right words. I didn't know how to ask this. I knew how bad the question was going to sound. John Houston. There was a pause. What about him? What do you know about him? James was silent. He knew this wasn't really the question I had for him. So I finally said it. Did he abuse his wife? Or kids or anything? My breathing was labored as I made this incredibly personal and out of the blue inquiry. I wouldn't know, man, James said, and his voice trailed in a way that let me know he wasn't comfortable with the direction of the conversation. I tried to drop it. I didn't tell James about the box. He was cold the rest of the conversation, and eventually I made up an excuse to get off the phone. I grabbed the papers and placed them in my nightstand, and even though I'm not entirely religious, I put an old Bible in the drawer with them. I drank a lot the rest of the afternoon until 6:05 p.m. and eventually calmed myself enough to the point of humor. I was confident that I was being ridiculous and that someone I knew was responsible for this extremely crude joke. I took a shower, and just as I stepped out, I heard my phone ringing from my master bedroom. I stumbled to the closet, grabbed a towel and wrapped it around my still wet body, and proceeded to the bedroom. Unknown, the phone's caller ID read. I picked it up and held it to my ear, still drunk. Yeah, I slurred. No response, just faint breathing. Hello, I said, clearly this time. I heard nothing for about 10 seconds, and then the phone clicked and made a hissing sound, and I could hear voices and muddled screaming, and whatever was happening on the other end of the phone sounded horrific. And the only words I could make out were maggots and then suffer. And the voice that shouted these words was grotesque and distorted, and I screamed into my phone. Who is this? But I got no response. The phone went silent again, and the breathing returned. And when I calmly asked again who I was speaking to, the caller hung up. A few seconds later, I received a text message. Check your P.O. box, it said. I tried to text back, but my message failed to send. I had a pit in my stomach and considered many things. Mainly I considered calling the police and telling them what was going on. However, morbid curiosity had boiled over, and I decided I had to check the P.O. box. I threw on some clothes quickly, and soon I was in the elevator and then in the lobby. I kept my head down and acknowledged nobody. I blew off the doorman when he greeted me, walked outside, jumped in my car, took a deep breath, and headed for the P.O. box. When I arrived at the post office station, the woman at the desk led me to my box. She told me she was glad to see me, and that over the last few days, I had received an unusual amount of mail. I was shocked at how much was in the box. It was nearly full. My stomach dropped. I left without even telling anyone or saying thank you. I assumed the woman saw me leaving, but she said nothing. I hurried home with the mail. I counted 45 letters, all in black envelopes. All of them had red calligraphy on them that read LFTTP. I got back to my penthouse and again made myself a drink before opening any of the letters. Eventually, I found the nerve to open one. I cut it open and held my breath as I read it. Keep me, was all it said. I opened 17 more letters that all read, keep me, and I was mildly relieved until I opened one very similar to John Huston's letter. This time, though, the letter was stained with blood. It smelled like vinegar. The letter simply stated, "Olivia Helm is in pieces, but she will never know peace again." I felt sick. The letter went on. "Olivia Helm screams for mercy, but we don't listen. Olivia Helm's blood has been replaced with piss." That was it. I had hoped that was all the letter said, but then I realized it was signed this time, at the bottom, in small lettering. It was signed simply, Black Shook. I looked through the rest of the letters, and they all read, "Keep me," except for the last one, number 45, which read, "Check the drawer you put the John Huston letter in." At that point, I knew this was real. This was no prank. Nobody I knew was in on this. It was simply a matter of terror, and I was receiving letters and phone calls from, at best, a very dangerous group of people who were stalking me, and at worst, some sort of evil, inhuman thing. I went to the drawer that contained the John Huston letter and pulled it out, along with the 2 other letters that read "Keep me." The John Huston letter was the same, except now it too smelled of vinegar. I also noticed that the Bible I had placed in the drawer with it was nowhere to be found. I looked at the 2 "Keep me" letters, one of which still read "Keep me," but the other one had changed in the most nefarious way possible. It had a name on it now. My name. Lewis Hardy sits among the spiders. He used to ask for real food. Now he accepts his maggot sandwiches because he has been trained to accept what he is given. I vomited on the floor of my bedroom before I could continue reading the letter. Lewis Hardy's flesh melts and regrows every minute. He is in constant pain and his suffering will go on through eternity. The next line almost made me pass out. Lewis Hardy is next. Signed again, Black Shook. I didn't know what to do. I only knew I didn't want these letters in my condo anymore. I drove out to the woods that night and burned every letter I had received from Black Shook. I heard animals growling and coyotes howling as I watched the letters burn into nothing but ash. I saw shadows out of the corner of my eye and then disappear when I turned to face them. The next day, I changed my phone number and canceled my P.O. box. For the next month, everything was as normal as it could have been. Every day I would come back to the complex and hesitantly ask the person at the desk if I had any new mail waiting for me. And fortunately, every letter during that time was completely benevolent. I was still anticipating the situation to present itself again. And in the back of my mind, I was waiting for Black Shook to reintroduce himself in some horrific way. Sometimes at night, I would wake up in cold sweats, and I could feel my heart skip a beat whenever I received a package I wasn't expecting. One night, driving through Phoenix, Arizona on business, I was listening to the desert winds blowing and then silencing themselves, and I looked up and saw a billboard for a TV show that read, "You can never escape me." I knew it was Black Shook, who wanted me to see the sign. I'm still waiting for his reemergence. The waiting is the worst part. Occasionally I hear his distorted voice telling me that he'll see me soon. I know that eventually I'll be just another name he uses to scare people into mental anguish until they too suffer the same fate as John Huston, Olivia Helm, and eventually me.